There is a single sentence about quantum physics that you have almost certainly heard, in a documentary maybe, from someone earnest at a party, in a video that felt like it was letting you in on a secret the universe had been keeping. The sentence goes something like this: reality does not exist until you look at it. Your attention, your awareness, your consciousness reaches into the world and makes it real. And physics, they tell you, has proven it. It is one of the most beautiful things anyone has ever said about you. It is repeated, in all seriousness, by people far smarter than whoever first said it to you. And it is wrong. Not slightly wrong, not wrong in some technical footnote. Wrong at the root, resting on a single misunderstood word. And once you see the mistake, you will never be able to unsee it. But stay with me, even though I have just taken your magic away inside the first minute, because here is my promise, and I will keep every word of it. What is actually true, all the way down at the bottom of this, is stranger than the story you were sold. It is weirder, it is real, and by the end of tonight, I am going to prove every piece of it to you, slowly, gently, in the dark. So let me do this properly. Let me hand you the beautiful idea first, at its full strength, exactly the way it was built to land, because you cannot understand why it is wrong until you have felt, in your own chest, why it is so very nearly impossible not to believe. But before we go down, one thing, and it'll only take you 10 seconds. Tell me where you are and what time it is where you're lying right now, your city and your clock. Just drop it in the comments, because here is what I love about this. Scattered across the whole planet in 100 different time zones, a lot of us are awake at this exact moment in the dark, about to think about the same strange thing, and not one of us can see the others. So let's see each other, just for a second. Leave your city and leave your 2 in the morning, and then settle in, get comfortable, and let's begin. So here it is, at its most beautiful. Don't brace against it, just let in. Reality, they will tell you, does not exist until you look at it. Out there, before anyone observes it, the world is not made of solid things. It is a haze, a fog of maybes. Every particle that will ever build a mountain, or a hand, or a star, is in its natural state. Not one thing in one place, but a smear of every place it could be, every path it could take. All at once, all unreal, all waiting. And what turns that fog into a fact, what freezes the smear into a single solid world, is one thing, and one thing only: attention, a witness, you. In this story, the universe is a question that only becomes an answer when something conscious turns to look. The particle hangs in all its possibilities like a held breath, and your awareness is what lets the breath go. Reality is not sitting out there finished, indifferent to you, running along whether you are here or not. Reality, in this telling, is participatory. It leans on you. It waits for you. The cold old cosmos of your school textbooks. The one that would grind on exactly the same if every mind in it blinked out. That cosmos is dead, and in its place is something astonishing, a universe that needs you to look at it in order to be. And they will tell you, this is not mysticism. This is not a hopeful story someone made up to feel less small. This is physics. This is the observer effect. This is the double slit experiment, the most famous experiment in the history of the science. And it shows, in a laboratory with instruments, that the act of observation reaches into the world and changes what is real. They will tell you the greatest minds of the 20th century stared into this and came away shaken. They will tell you that consciousness is written into the operating system of the universe, at the deepest level we have ever probed. And so, they conclude, you are not a bystander in reality. You are a co-author of it. Every time you open your eyes, you are collapsing a world into being. You matter, cosmically, literally, at the level of the equations. The universe was incomplete, and you complete it. Now, sit with how good that feels for a moment. Because I am not going to mock it, and I am not going to mock you if some part of you has always half believed it. It is one of the most seductive ideas our species has ever produced, and it is seductive for an honest reason. It takes the loneliest fact about being a person, the suspicion that you are a tiny accident on a wet rock circling an ordinary star, lost in a vastness that will never know your name, and it turns that fact completely inside out. It says, no, you are essential. Nothing is real until you make it real. The cosmos has been waiting for eyes, and yours will do. That is a gorgeous thing to be told. It is the kind of idea you want to be true, and tonight, I'm going to take it apart. I want to be honest with you about that from the very first minute, because I am not here to sell you a warm feeling, and I am not here to sneer at anyone who ever found comfort in this. I am here to do the more interesting thing, the harder thing, which is to walk you all the way down into what the physics actually says, past the guru version and the documentary version, and the half-remembered from a video version, down to the real experiment and the real equations and the real people who argued about them for 100 years. And I am telling you now, so you can decide whether you trust me for the next little while, that when we get to the bottom, the beautiful idea is not going to survive intact. But here is my promise, and I mean it completely. What is down there, instead, is stranger than the story we just told. It is weirder, and it is more honest. And in a way I will earn by the end, it is even more worth the wonder. It just will not flatter you the way the fantasy does. The truth almost never flatters you. That is one of the ways you can tell it apart from a sales pitch. So let me make you 3 specific promises about where we are going, so you have something to hold as you drift. By the end of tonight, you will understand exactly what the word observation means in physics. Not what it means in English, not what it means in a meditation retreat, but what a physicist means when they say a particle was observed. And I will tell you now that when you understand it, the entire mystical reading of the observer effect falls apart. Not because I argued it away, but because the word never meant what you were told it meant. Second, you will understand why a rock can do it. Why a cold, dead, dumb speck of matter with no mind, no eyes, no awareness, nothing you would ever call a witness, does exactly the same thing to a quantum particle that the most elaborate laboratory does. And once you see that, you will see that consciousness was never required for any of it. It was smuggled into the story after the fact, by people who wanted it there. And third, I will show you the one part of this that does not dissolve, because I am not going to pretend the whole thing is a simple misunderstanding you can wave away. There is a genuine mystery at the center of quantum physics, a real, unsolved, 100-year-old wound in our understanding of the world, and it is arguably deeper and more disturbing than your mind makes reality. The pop version took that real mystery and swapped it for a flattering one. Tonight, we put the real one back. And the real one does not need you to be magic. It needs the universe to be far stranger than a comfortable story would ever allow. Deal? Then let's begin where the whole thing begins. Let's begin at the 2 slits. Picture a wall with 2 narrow vertical openings cut into it, side by side, a little apart, 2 slits. Behind that wall, further back, a screen. The kind of screen that lights up wherever something hits it, so it keeps a record. And in front of the wall, a little device that fires tiny things at it, one at a time. We will fire electrons, because electrons are where this story was sharpened. But hold in your mind that it has been done with photons of light, with whole atoms, with molecules built of hundreds of atoms, big enough that in some sense they sit just at the edge of things you could imagine seeing. The result is always the same kind of strange. It does not care what you throw. Fire the electrons, one at a time. Each one leaves the little gun, crosses the gap, and somewhere ahead of it are the two open slits. It has to go through. And on the far screen, one by one, tiny bright points appear where each electron lands. Tick, tick, tick. At first it looks like nothing, like scatter, like rain on a window pane. But leave it running. Let thousands go through, then millions, each one a single point of light on the screen. And slowly, out of all those separate landings, a pattern assembles itself. And it is the wrong pattern. It is the impossible pattern. Here is what your whole life of intuition expects. Two slits, so the electrons pile up in two bands, one behind each opening, like paint sprayed through two gaps in a stencil. Two stripes. That is what a stream of little bullets would do. That is what sand would do, poured through two slots, two heaps. That is not what you get. What builds up on the screen instead is a row of many bright bands, separated by dark gaps where almost nothing ever lands, fading out at the edges, not two stripes. A whole striped pattern, many lines of light and shadow, marching across the screen. And that pattern has a name. And the name is the first crack in the floor, because that pattern is an interference pattern. It is the exact signature of waves. You have seen it without knowing its name. Drop two stones into still water side by side. Two sets of ripples spread out and cross each other. And where two crests meet, they add, and the water rises higher. And where a crest meets a trough, they cancel, and the water goes flat and still. Crossing ripples make a fan of high and low, reinforcement and cancellation, a woven pattern of where the waves agree and where they erase each other. That woven pattern is interference. It is the fingerprint of something that comes in waves, that can overlap with itself, that can add and cancel, and here it is, being built one electron at a time, on a screen, by particles you fired like bullets, one by one, with gaps of empty time between them. Stop and feel how strange that already is, before we add a single mysterious thing to it. Each electron left the gun alone. There was no crowd of electrons to jostle it, no other electron in the room to ripple against. It went through the slits by itself, and yet the pattern that slowly emerges from thousands of these lonely single travellers is the pattern of waves crossing and interfering. Waves crossing with what? There was only ever one electron in flight at a time. What did it interfere with? The only answer the mathematics will give you, the answer that has never once been wrong, in a century of asking, is the answer that broke everyone who first heard it. Each single electron does not go through one slit. Each single electron, on its own, in some real sense, we will spend this whole night trying to say, honestly, goes through both slits at once, as a spread out wave of possibility, and comes out the other side, overlapping with itself, its own two halves crossing like the two sets of ripples, adding here, cancelling there. And that self-crossing is what steers where it is allowed to land and where it is forbidden. One electron, interfering with itself, because on the way it was not a tiny dot on a single path. It was a smear of every path, taking all of them, a wave of maybe. That is the fog we talked about at the start. That is real. I am not walking that back tonight. That part is as solid as anything in science. Before it is caught, the electron does not have a single, definite path. It travels as a spread of possibilities, and those possibilities are real enough to interfere with each other and leave their striped signature on the screen. Hold on to that, because it is true, and it is the true weirdness. And the fantasy is going to try to borrow its authority in a minute. Now here is the move. Here is the exact moment where the beautiful lie is born. A physicist looks at this and asks the obvious human question. If each electron really goes through both slits, then let me just check. Let me put a little detector at the slits, one at each opening, a small instrument that can tell me which slit each electron actually passed through. Let me catch it in the act of being in two places. Let me watch. So they put the detectors in, and they run it again, and something changes. With the detectors on, watching which slit each electron goes through, the striped interference pattern on the screen disappears. It simply vanishes. And in its place, the sensible pattern comes back. The one your intuition wanted all along. The two plain heaps, one behind each slit. Like bullets, like sand. The waviness is gone. The self-crossing is gone. The electron, the moment you watch which slit it takes, stops going through both, picks one, and behaves like an ordinary little dot that went one way, like a sober citizen. Watch it, and it is a particle taking one path. Don't watch it, and it is a wave taking every path. The pattern on the screen changes depending on whether you are looking there. That is the experiment. That is the real, replicated, unshakable result at the heart of everything, and I have not exaggerated one word of it. Observation changes the outcome. Whether or not you watch which slit the electron goes through determines whether you get waves or particles on the screen. This has been done thousands of times, in the most careful ways human beings know how to be careful, and it always comes out like this. The looking matters. The looking changes what happens. And can you feel how short the leap is now? Can you feel how badly the mind wants to take the next step? Observation changes reality. Watching collapses the wave of maybes into a single fact. And what does the watching? What is an observer? Well, obviously, you are. A mind, a consciousness, someone paying attention. So, the story writes itself. The last line practically speaks itself out loud. Consciousness collapses the wave. Awareness creates the fact. The universe is a fog of possibility until a conscious being looks, and then, and only then, does it choose to be real. That is the whole argument. That is how you get from a real laboratory result to the idea that your mind builds the world. It is not a stupid leap. It is a short, natural, almost irresistible leap, and it has been made by people far smarter than whoever first repeated it to you. It hangs on a single word, observer, and that one word is carrying the entire mystical cathedral on its back. So that is the thread we are going to pull. Not the experiment, which is true, the word. When a physicist says the electron was observed, what actually, physically? What is the thing that reaches out and freezes the fog? Is it a mind noticing? Or is it something else entirely? Something that was hiding in plain sight inside that little detector the whole time? Something that has nothing to do with awareness at all? Because here is the first quiet thing I will ask you to wonder about as we go down. When they turned the detectors on and the waviness vanished, was there a person in the room watching the readout in real time? Or was the detector simply switched on, doing its silent mechanical thing in the dark, recording while every human being had gone home for the night? Hold that question. The answer to it is the beginning of the end of the beautiful lie. And it is where we are going next, into the slits themselves, to find out what watching really was. So, let's go and stand at the slit. Let's get close enough to see what actually happens when a physicist says the electron was observed, because everything hangs on this, and almost nobody who repeats the mystical version has ever looked. Start with a simple, stubborn question. How do you find out which slit an electron went through? Really think about it, physically, like an engineer, and not like a poet. The electron is unimaginably small. You cannot lean in and squint at it. You cannot shine a gentle, harmless light on it the way you would to read a book, because there is no such thing as a gentle, harmless light at that scale. To see anything at all, something has to physically come off it and reach you. A little light has to bounce off the thing and travel to your eye or your instrument carrying the news. That is what seeing is, always, even for you, right now, reading this. Light is landing on the page, bouncing off, and flying into your eyes. Seeing is not a passive beam of attention that you send out into the world. Seeing is the world physically arriving at you, particle by particle. Have you ever noticed that you cannot see in a truly dark room, no matter how hard you stare, no matter how much you want to? That is not a small thing. It is telling you that your looking was never a force you send out. It is a harvest of what comes in. Your eyes do nothing to the world. They only catch what the world throws at them. Now shrink that down to the electron. To find out which slit it took, you have to make something physically interact with it, right there at the opening. You have to bounce a particle of light off it, or push on it with a magnetic field, or in some concrete, physical way, make the electron leave a mark on a piece of equipment. There is no other option. Information about which slit the electron went through cannot get out of that region and into a detector unless the electron physically pushes on something, and that something pushes back. And there it is. That is the whole secret, and we are only a few minutes in. To get the which slit information, you had to touch the electron. You had to hit this fragile, spread-out wave of possibility with another physical thing, and a wave of possibility that delicate does not survive being hit. When you bounce a particle of light off the electron to find out where it is, you kick it, you disturb it, you force it through a real physical shove to commit to a location, to stop being a smeared-out fog crossing both slits and become a little dot that got knocked onto one path. The interference pattern does not vanish because a mind became aware of the electron. The interference pattern vanishes because you physically interfered with the electron. That is why the word is what it is. Interference. It was never a metaphor. It was a description of a shove. Feel the ground shift, just slightly. The observation was not a mind noticing. The observation was a collision. It was one lump of matter physically colliding with another lump of matter and knocking the fog into a fact. And collisions do not require anyone to be conscious. Collisions happen in the dark. Collisions happen at the bottom of the sea and in the heart of a dead star and in every cubic inch of empty space where no eye has ever been or will ever be. The thing that killed the wave was contact, not awareness. But maybe you are not convinced yet. Maybe you are thinking, all right, but a person still built the detector. A person still set it up. A person is still somewhere in the story wanting to know. Doesn't the intention count? Doesn't the reaching to know still trace back to a mind? So let me take the mind out completely. Let me show you that nature does this to itself, constantly, everywhere, with no experiment and no experimenter anywhere near. Here is the deeper truth that the detector was only one small example of. An electron, or any little quantum thing, loses its foggy, wave-like, all paths at once character the instant its situation gets recorded anywhere in the wider physical world. And I mean anywhere, not recorded by a person, not recorded by a mind, recorded by a single stray particle of light that happened to bounce off it and fly away, recorded by one air molecule that bumped into it, recorded by the faint warmth it gives off into the metal around it. The moment which path information about the electron leaks out into its surroundings, in any physical form at all, even a form that no one will ever collect or read, the two possibilities can no longer blur back together and cross and interfere. The waviness is gone. The fog has become a fact, and not one conscious thing was anywhere near it. This is why you have never, in your entire life, seen a chair go through two doorways at once. Not because chairs obey different laws than electrons, they do not. The same physics runs the chair. But a chair is enormous. A chair is being pelted every instant by trillions of particles of light, buffeted by air, radiating its own warmth into the room. A chair is screaming its location into its surroundings 1 trillion times a second. Its which place information is copied into the world so relentlessly, so redundantly, so instantly, that it never gets even the faintest chance to be a fog of maybes. It is pinned into being one solid thing in one solid place by the sheer racket of its own existence, bouncing off everything nearby. The chair is being observed, in the only sense the physics ever meant, by the entire room, ceaselessly, whether the lights are on or off, whether anyone is home or not. The universe, it turns out, is watching itself everywhere, all the time, with no eyes and no mind, simply because everything is constantly bumping into everything else. Every collision is an observation. Every particle of light that scatters off a mote of dust is an observation. The sunlit side of a boulder on an airless moon that no living thing has ever seen or ever will is being observed relentlessly by every photon that strikes it. This has been going on for 13.5 billion years in the overwhelming majority of a cosmos that has never held a single living witness. The froth of quantum possibility gets pinned down into solid facts constantly, ceaselessly, out in the deep dark where no one is looking, because looking, in the physics, was never about a mind. It was about contact. It was about information leaking out into the world, and the world is nothing but things, leaking information into each other. So here is where we are. The whole mystical argument rested on one word, observer. And when we walked up to the slit and looked at what an observation physically is, the word came apart in our hands. To observe was to interact was to collide, and collisions run the cosmos with the lights off. The conscious watcher was never doing the work. The watcher's instruments were doing the work by touching. And instruments are just matter, and matter has been doing this to itself since the first 3 minutes after the beginning of time, in a universe that would not contain a living eye for another 9 billion years. Now I have to be honest with you, because there is a famous experiment that gets waved around at exactly this point to drag consciousness back into the story, and if I skipped it, you would be right not to trust me. It is called the delayed choice quantum eraser, and it is real, and it is strange, and it is the single most misrepresented experiment in all of popular science. Let me tell you what it actually is, because told honestly it does the opposite of what the mystics claim. It drives the final nail in. Here is the setup, stripped to its bones. You send your quantum particle toward the two slits, and you arrange things so that which path information gets created, so the electron gets marked, in principle, with which slit it took. So far, no interference. We know why. The information is out. But now you add a twist. You build a second stage, further down the line, a clever bit of apparatus that can do one of two things to that witch path marker. It can either preserve the marker, keep the witch slit information readable, or it can scramble the marker beyond recovery. Erase it, mix it up so thoroughly that it becomes physically impossible, even in principle, to ever tell which slit the electron took. And the result is this. When the witch path information is preserved, you get no interference, particle behavior, the plane pattern. When the witch path information is erased, made truly unrecoverable, the interference pattern comes back, the waviness returns. And the truly dramatic part, the part that gets the breathless narration, is that you can make this erase or preserve choice late. You can make it after the electron has already hit the final screen. The choice about whether to erase the information can come in time after the particle's journey is supposedly over. And so the story you are sold is your choice now reaches back in time and changes what the particle did in the past. Mind over history. The observer's decision rewriting reality backwards. Consciousness, once again, at the wheel of the cosmos. It is nonsense, and here is exactly why, and it is not even complicated. In the real experiment, the screen, when you look at the raw record of everything that landed on it, never shows an interference pattern, ever. Not when you preserve the information, not when you erase it. The screen is always just a blob. The interference pattern is not sitting there on the screen waiting to be changed by your later choice. You only ever find the interference by going back afterward and sorting the landings into groups, according to what the eraser did to each partner particle. In the group where the information was erased, that subset of dots, pulled out of the blob after the fact, forms an interference pattern. In the group where the information was kept, that subset forms the plane pattern. But the total on the screen never changed. Nothing reached back in time. Nothing about the past was rewritten. You simply sorted an existing pile of dots into two piles using a key you generated later, and each pile, on its own, has a different texture. Nothing was changed by a mind. Nothing was changed at all. The information about which slit existed, or it did not exist, out there in the physical apparatus, and the pattern followed the information with the mindless obedience of water finding its level. And the choice to erase? In the actual experiments, that choice is made by a machine, or by a random number generator, or by the polarization of a particle splitting at a piece of glass. No human being decides it in real time. No consciousness weighs in. You could run the entire delayed choice quantum eraser sealed in a box in an empty building over a long weekend, with the results written silently to a hard drive, and open the file on Monday. And everything, the erasing, the sorting, the recovery of interference, would have already happened, correctly, in the dark, over the weekend, with not one conscious being within a mile of it, and it would all still work. That is the experiment they use to put your mind back at the center of the universe. And when you actually look at it, it is the strongest proof yet that your mind was never there. What governs the pattern is not awareness, it is information, physical information, whether the witch path news exists somewhere in the world or has been erased from it. Machines make that information exist. Machines erase it. Machines sort the results. The pattern obeys the physics of the information, not the presence of a watcher. Take every conscious being out of the building, and it runs exactly the same. So let me gather what we have, because we have demolished something large. The double slit experiment is real, and its central strangeness is real. Before it is disturbed, a single electron travels as a spread of possibilities, taking every path and interferes with itself. That part of the wonder survives the night intact, and it should stagger you because it means the solid world you trust is stitched together out of a bottom layer that does not have definite properties until it is pushed on. That is true, and it is stranger than most people's mysticism. But the observer effect, the thing that turns the fog into a fact, is not a mind. It is contact. It is one piece of matter physically interacting with another and forcing the possibilities to commit and copying the news of that commitment out into the surrounding world. It happens whenever information leaks, which is always, everywhere, in the dark, across a cosmos that spent most of its life with no one in it. The detector at the Slit was never special because a scientist was curious. It was special because it touched the electron, and a stray photon in the void, touching a lonely atom no one will ever name, does precisely the same thing, with no curiosity anywhere in it. The word observer was carrying the whole cathedral, and the word just meant a physical thing that interacts and records. It never meant you. If that eraser felt like it was straining the size of the world, let me stretch it all the way, because there is a version of this experiment that is not done on a bench in a lab. It is done across the entire visible universe, and it will show you, at the grandest scale there is, that no mind was ever needed. First, look up. Have you ever stood outside and really taken in that the light landing in your eye from a star left that star before you were born, sometimes before your grandparents were born, sometimes before there was a human being anywhere to look up at all? Starlight is old news arriving late. Hold that, because we are about to use it. Now, a great physicist named John Wheeler asked a simple, staggering question. What if we ran the two-path experiment, not with two slits a hair apart, but with two paths the size of a galaxy? It can be done, because the universe has built the apparatus for us. Out in deep space there are quasars, blazingly bright cores of distant galaxies, so far away their light has travelled for billions of years to reach us. And sometimes, between us and that ancient light, sits a massive galaxy. And the gravity of that galaxy bends light the way a lens does. So the quasar's light, streaming toward us, can be bent around the left side of that intervening galaxy, or around the right side, and arrive here by two different roads separated by 100,000 light years of emptiness, two paths, a double slit as wide as a galaxy. And here is Wheeler's blade. Tonight, right now, you get to choose how to look. You can set up your instrument to detect which side of the galaxy each particle of light came around, the which path measurement, and if you do, the light behaves like a particle that took one road. Or you can combine the two roads and look for the woven interference pattern, and if you do, the light behaves like a wave that took both. Your choice, made tonight. On light that has been flying through the dark for billions of years. Light that passed that intervening galaxy and supposedly chose its road when the Earth did not yet exist, when there was no life anywhere, when the atoms that would become you were still scattered inside unborn stars. And so the seductive story arrives, right on schedule, bigger and more intoxicating than ever. Your choice, tonight, reaches back across billions of years and determines what that light did before the Earth was born. Your mind, its power now stretched to the scale of the cosmos, editing the ancient past. If a human decision can reach back through deep time and settle what starlight did before there were humans, then surely, consciousness is woven into the universe at the root. And it is the same misunderstanding as before, only wearing the whole night sky as a costume. You are not reaching back and changing what the light did. Here is the honest and stranger truth. There simply was no fact about which road the light took, not because your mind had not yet made it, but because which road is not a settled detail the universe bothers to fill in until the entire question is finished being asked. The light did not travel as a tiny dot that secretly took one road and waited billions of years for you to catch it out. It travelled as the spread out possibility we have talked about all night, and which road only becomes a fact when the measurement is complete, and the measurement is a single event that happens to stretch, in this case, across billions of years and billions of light years. The past is not rewritten. It was never written in that much detail in the first place. The universe does not fill in which path until the whole experiment, however vast, is whole. And now ask the question that ends it. Was a mind required for any of this? If, instead of your telescope, that ancient light had simply struck a cold rock drifting in space and scattered off it in a way that recorded which road it came around, the which path fact would settle exactly the same, with no astronomer, no choice, no awareness, no one. The rock would measure it. The universe has been running this galaxy-sized experiment on itself endlessly, with quasars and lensing galaxies and drifting dust, for almost the whole of time, in the overwhelming dark where no one has ever watched. Your telescope tonight is not special because you are conscious. It is special because it is a thing that records, and the cosmos is full of things that record, and always was. So even blown up to the size of everything, even stretched across the entire history of the universe, the observer effect keeps its shape and keeps its secret. To observe is to interact. Interaction settles the fog into fact, and it happens in the deep dark of space with no eyes and no minds, exactly as it happens at the Slit, exactly as it happens in the sealed lab over a weekend. The scale changed. The lesson did not, which only sharpens the question we have been circling, and it is time to face it head on. If the mind is this unnecessary, this absent, this clearly just one more recording device among the rocks and the telescopes and the drifting dust, then why on earth did some of the most brilliant physicists who ever lived look at all this and reach, with fear in their hands, for consciousness? They were not fools, so what did they see? To understand why the mind ended up in this story, you have to go back to the late 1920s and early 30s to a small number of people in a few European cities who were, right then, writing down the rules of quantum physics for the first time. And you have to understand the strange position they were in, because it is a position almost no scientists in history have ever been in. They had a theory that worked. It worked with a precision that had never been seen before and has never been beaten since. It predicted the results of experiments to more decimal places than anyone knew what to do with. It was, and remains, the most successful theory in the history of the human race. There is not a phone or a computer or a medical scanner in your life that does not run on it being correct, and they did not understand what it meant. They could turn the crank and get the right answer every time, and they could not tell you what the machinery under the crank was actually doing to the world. They had in their hands a perfect recipe and no idea what it was cooking. Here was their problem, and I am going to give it to you exactly as sharp as they felt it, because this is the real thing, the true mystery, the one the flattering version was built to cover up. I told you it would survive the night. Here it is. The mathematics of quantum physics comes in two completely different pieces, and they do not fit together. The first piece describes how a quantum thing behaves when nobody is measuring it. Left alone, the wave of possibilities we have been talking about evolves in a way that is smooth and predictable and perfectly lawful. It spreads, it flows, It does its foggy all paths at once thing according to one clean equation, and if you know the wave now, that equation tells you exactly what the wave will be later. No randomness, no jumps. It is as orderly and deterministic as a planet going around the sun. That is piece 1, and it is beautiful. Then you measure it, and piece 2 takes over, and piece 2 is a horror. In the instant of measurement, the smooth, spreading wave of many possibilities does something the first equation never describes and never permits. It jumps. Suddenly, discontinuously, it throws away every possibility but one, and one outcome becomes real, and all the others simply vanish as if they had never been. And which one becomes real is not determined by anything. It is random, truly random, random in a way that has no cause underneath it, the only genuine dice roll anyone has ever found in the whole of nature. The smooth, lawful wave that was spreading through every path a heartbeat ago collapses in an instant to a single spike, one place, one fact, chosen by nothing. So the theory has 2 rules. Rule 1. When you are not looking, the world flows smoothly through all its possibilities, lawful and continuous. Rule 2. When you look, it jumps at random to a single one of them. And here is the wound, the actual open wound at the centre of physics, the thing that has not healed in 100 years and has not healed tonight. What counts as looking? Where exactly is the line? What precisely is a measurement such that reality switches from rule 1 to rule 2 the moment one happens? Have you ever been completely, physically certain of something your reasoning told you could not be so? Held both at once, the sureness and the impossibility, and felt a little seasick in the gap between them. That gap is where these men lived for the rest of their lives. Hold that feeling. It is the honest, emotional shape of this whole problem, and they never got to put it down. The equations do not say. There is no line in the mathematics. There is no term in the theory that says measurement happens here. You, the physicist, have to reach in by hand and declare, this thing over here is a measuring device. So switch to rule 2 now, and nobody could say what made a thing a measuring device, rather than just another lump of the smoothly flowing quantum world. This is called the measurement problem, and do not let the dull little name fool you. It is one of the deepest unsolved problems in all of science, and everything, the whole rest of tonight, the whole mystical detour of the last century, grows out of it. Now stand where the founders stood and feel the trap. A measuring device is made of atoms, and atoms obey rule 1, the smooth quantum flow. That is the whole theory. So when your detector measures the electron, the detector is just a big pile of quantum atoms interacting with a small quantum electron. By rule 1, the smooth rule, the only fundamental rule, the detector should not collapse anything. It should just join the fog. The electron was spread across 2 slits, and now the detector that touched it should become part of the spread. A bigger wave, with one part of it holding, electron went left, needle points left, and another part holding, electron went right, needle points right, both at once, smoothly, no collapse, no jump, no single outcome. The detector should go foggy too. And then a person walks over to read the detector, but the person is also made of atoms. So by rule 1, the person should join the fog as well. One version of them seeing the needle left, another seeing it right, both at once. A smooth wave of 2 possible scientists in one body. Do you see the runaway? Nothing in the mathematics ever stops this. The electron is a wave of possibilities, so the detector that touches it becomes a wave of possibilities, so the scientist who reads the detector becomes a wave of possibilities. So the colleague they phone becomes a wave of possibilities. The smooth rule, followed honestly, spreads the fog outward forever and never collapses anything to a single fact anywhere. The chain of this got entangled with, that got entangled with the other thing, runs on and on with no natural place to stop. And yet, when you actually do the experiment, you, the real scientist, only ever see one needle pointing one way. You never feel like a smooth blur of two possible selves. You open your eyes, and there is one world, one outcome, one fact. The runaway has to stop somewhere, because your experience is single and definite, but the mathematics contains nothing, anywhere, that stops it. So the founders went looking for the stopper. What is different about the end of that chain? What is special about the last link, the place where the endless fog finally, actually, becomes one real outcome that a person experiences? And one man, the sharpest mathematical mind of the entire group, followed this logic with such ruthless honesty that he chased it all the way to the only place it seemed it could possibly end. His name was John von Neumann, and it is hard to overstate how formidable he was. He is one of the greatest mathematicians of the 20th century, a man whose colleagues, themselves geniuses, half-seriously wondered whether he was an entirely superior form of intelligence imitating a human being. And in 1932 he wrote the book that put quantum physics on rigorous mathematical foundations. And in it he looked hard at this runaway chain. And he made a devastating observation. He showed, with mathematics no one could refute, that you can put the dividing line, the place where you switch from the smooth rule to the collapse rule, anywhere you like along the chain, and you get the same experimental prediction every time. You can say collapse happens at the detector, or at the scientist's eye, or at their optic nerve, or deep in their brain, and the theory does not care. The math gives the identical answer, no matter where you draw the line. The line is movable. The physics does not pin it anywhere. And that is an astonishing and disturbing thing to have proven, because if the physics does not pin the line anywhere along the chain, then where does the fog actually turn into a fact? The chain runs electron, detector, photons, eye, nerve, brain, and then, at the very end of it, the one thing in the whole sequence that is not like the others. The one place where the runaway must stop, because you know firsthand that it does. The place where instead of two possibilities held smoothly at once, there is suddenly, undeniably, just one experience of one world. Your awareness. The moment you consciously know the answer, and so von Neumann's chain seemed to point, with the cold authority of unarguable mathematics, at consciousness as the only candidate left standing. Everything up to the mind is made of atoms and obeys the smooth rule and just joins the fog. The mind is the one place the fog is not, the one place there is always just a single, experienced fact. So maybe the collapse, the jump from many to one, happens exactly there, at the entry of the physical into the mental. Maybe consciousness is the stopper. This is not a guru talking. This is the most rigorous mathematical treatment of quantum theory ever written, following its own logic without flinching. And a generation later, another giant picked it up and made it vivid. Eugene Wigner, a Nobel laureate, one of the deepest thinkers in the field, took von Neumann's chain seriously and dramatized it with a scenario that still gets argued about tonight. Imagine a friend, sealed in a laboratory, who does a quantum measurement, sees a definite result, and writes it down. From outside, you, who have not opened the door, must, by the smooth rule, describe your friend and their whole lab as one great wave of possibilities, both outcomes at once, a blurred mixture of a friend who saw this and a friend who saw that. But your friend, inside, most certainly did not feel blurred. Your friend saw one clear result and is a little annoyed you are asking. So which is it? Was there one fact in that room, or two possibilities, before you opened the door? Wigner's answer, for a time, was that his friend's consciousness had already collapsed the wave. That a mind, any mind, breaks the chain and makes one world, two conscious observers, and the mind is what turns maybe into is. I want to stop here and say something clearly, because it is the honest heart of this act. These men were not being mystical, and they were not being sloppy, and they were not looking for a way to feel important in the cosmos. They were being relentlessly, almost painfully logical. They had a real problem, the measurement problem, a genuine hole in the theory that is still a hole. They had von Neumann's proof that the physics would not tell them where the fog becomes fact. And they noticed, correctly, that the one place in the entire universe where you are absolutely certain there is only ever one definite outcome is your own conscious experience. You never experience the fog. You only ever experience one world. So it was not crazy, it was almost forced to wonder whether experience itself was the thing that made the one world. They reached for consciousness not out of wishful thinking but out of desperation, because the mathematics had backed them into a corner and consciousness was the only wall left to put their back against. They were wrong. I will show you next act exactly how and why they were wrong, and it is a beautiful piece of physics that they simply did not have yet, that had not been worked out in their lifetimes. But understand what it means that they were wrong. It means the answer was subtle enough to fool the 2 or 3 sharpest minds who ever looked at it. That is how good the trap is. So if some part of you believed the mind makes reality story, you are in extraordinary company, and you are not foolish. You are standing exactly where von Neumann and Wigner stood. You were just handed the story without the correction that came later. Because here is what happened to the story after these careful, reluctant, deeply qualified ideas left the hands of the physicists. It got out, and out in the wider world, all the care fell away. The greatest physicists thought consciousness plays a role in quantum measurement, became science proves your mind creates reality. The reluctant, cornered, technical suggestion became a confident spiritual advertisement. The films got made, the best-selling books got written, the workshops filled up. You were told you could think a parking space into existence, cure yourself by belief, manifest wealth by vibrating at reality, and that quantum physics, the observer effect, the double slit, proved it. Wigner's agonized technical puzzle about where a chain of atoms stops became a promise that you are a god who forgot. And the one detail that never made the leap, the detail that changes everything, was that Wigner himself, later in his life, abandoned the idea. He gave it up. He came to think that consciousness causing collapse led to conclusions he could not accept, and he let it go. The founder of the most famous version of the consciousness argument walked away from it. That part is never in the workshop. Before we go and find the thing that Wigner reached for and could not yet see, the physics that dissolves the whole chain without ever invoking a mind, let me say one plain thing to you directly. Wherever you are, however low the lights are, if you have found this walk down worth taking, if you would like to keep taking these walks, following the real ideas past the flattering versions into the stranger truth underneath, then a quiet tap on the subscribe button keeps them coming, and it is the one small thing that tells the wider machinery to carry this to the next person lying awake, wondering what is real. That is all. Now come back down with me, because we are about to solve the thing that beat the geniuses. Because here is what they were missing. Von Neumann and Wigner looked at that runaway chain, the electron blurring, the detector blurring the scientist, and they saw no place for it to stop except the mind. But they made one quiet assumption without noticing it, an assumption so natural that it took the field decades to see it and question it. They assumed the chain was lonely. They pictured the electron, the detector, the observer, sealed off. A clean little line of dominoes falling in an empty universe, with nothing else touching it until it reached a mind. And that assumption is false, catastrophically, wonderfully false. The chain was never alone. It was never in an empty universe. It was sitting the entire time inside a roaring crowd of everything else, being touched on all sides by a world screaming with light and heat and air. And once you put the chain back into the roaring, crowded, sleepless world it actually lives in, the fog turns to fact, all on its own, for the most ordinary reason imaginable, long, long before any mind is anywhere near it, and no one has to be conscious for a single step of it. That is where we go now. To the thing in the room the founders left out, to the reason the moon is there when nobody looks. Let's go back to that runaway chain and put it where it actually lives. The founders imagined it clean and alone. Electron, detector, observer, a single thread of dominoes falling in the dark. But nothing in this universe is alone, so let's be honest about the room. That detector at the slit is not floating in a void, it is sitting in a world. It is being struck, every fraction of every second, by countless particles of light. It is soaking in warmth and giving off warmth. It is surrounded by air, by the faint electric and magnetic whisper of every charged thing nearby, by the ceaseless trembling background of a universe that is never truly still and never truly empty anywhere. The detector is not a lonely domino. It is one small thing immersed in an enormous, restless world. Now watch what that does to the runaway. The founders were right about the first step. When the detector touches the electron, the detector does get pulled into the fog. For the tiniest sliver of an instant, the detector really does become a blur of two possibilities, needle left and needle right, both at once, exactly as the smooth rule demands. So far, so troubling. But the detector is a big thing sitting in that roaring world, and here is what the founders left out. In that same sliver of an instant, the news of which way the needle went does not stay in the needle, it floods outward. Photons bouncing off the needle carry the news away at the speed of light. The warmth the needle radiates carries it. The air molecules that rebound off it carry it. In less time than you can name, the fact of which way that needle pointed is copied, redundantly, wastefully, into billions upon billions of tiny things flying off in every direction into the wider world. And once that has happened, the two possibilities can never blur back together. This is the crucial thing, and I am going to say it carefully because it is the whole answer. For two possibilities to interfere, to do the wave thing, to cross and add and cancel and stay both at once, they have to be kept perfectly, delicately, isolated. The fog only survives in the dark and the silence. The instant the information about which possibility is real leaks out and gets copied into the surrounding world, the two possibilities lose the ability to recombine. They still both exist in the mathematics, but they can no longer touch each other, can no longer interfere, can no longer show any trace of their two-ness. They split into separate, self-contained stories that go on running side by side without ever again being able to reach across and affect one another. The wave has, for every practical purpose and every possible experiment become a fact. One story, needle left, and a world built on it. Another story, needle right, and a world built on it. And no bridge between them, ever again. That is the answer the founders did not have. It is the thing Wigner reached for in the dark and could not find, because the physics of it was not worked out until decades after he posed his puzzle. The fog does not wait for a mind to collapse it. The fog collapses itself, functionally, instantly, the moment its secret leaks into a large enough surrounding world, which is always, because the world is enormous and everything leaks. The observer that turns maybe into was never the scientist. It was the room. It was the air and the light and the warmth. It was the sheer, unstoppable tendency of information to spread out into a big world and never come back. The environment is the observer. The universe observes itself, everywhere, constantly, by the mindless fact that its parts cannot stop touching and telling on each other. And now you can see why a chair is never a fog, and why you are not, and why the moon is simply there. A chair, a person, a moon, is not a lonely electron kept in surgical isolation. It is a vast, warm, brightly lit thing, drenched in a flood of light and air, broadcasting its every property into its surroundings a trillion times a second. Its possibilities are pinned into a single story so instantly and so overwhelmingly that it never gets even the ghost of a chance to be two things at once. The moon pours its which place information into the sunlight, bouncing off it and the starlight, and the faint warmth it sheds ceaselessly, and has done so for 4.5 billion years. And so the moon is exactly, boringly, definitely there, whether or not a single eye is turned toward it. It does not need you. It never did. It is watched, in the only sense that matters, by every photon of sunlight that strikes it. And it was fully, solidly real for billions of years before the first creature on Earth opened the first eye and looked up. This is why you have to work so unbelievably hard to see quantum weirdness at all. Think about it. If reality were a fog waiting for a conscious look, weirdness would be everywhere. The default, spilling out of every glance. Instead, to see a single electron behave like a wave, physicists have to fight. They have to cool their equipment to a whisper above the coldest possible temperature to quiet the warmth. They have to pull a hard vacuum to get the air molecules out of the way. They have to shield against stray light and stray fields, and the trembling of the building and the tug of passing trucks. They have to build a tiny, ferociously defended pocket of isolation, a little bubble where they have temporarily stopped the world from touching the thing and stealing its secret. And only inside that hard-won bubble, only where they have held the roaring world back by main force, does the fog appear. The instant the isolation fails, the instant one stray particle of light gets in and carries the news out, the fog collapses to a fact, and no one has to look. The weirdness is not held back by the absence of a mind. It is held back by the presence of a world. Consciousness has nothing to do with it. Isolation is the whole game, and the universe is almost never isolated. Let that reverse the entire picture for you. The mystical story said, "Reality is a fog, and consciousness is the rare special ingredient that turns it solid." The truth is the exact opposite. Solidity is the default, forced on everything by a crowded, touching world. And the fog is the rare special thing you can only glimpse by heroically clearing the world away. Facts are cheap and everywhere. It is possibility, kept alive and pure, that is precious and almost impossible to hold. So here is a question to carry into the dark. Everything around you right now, The wall, the window, the weight of your own body on the bed feels solid and certain and simply given. But what if that certainty is not the world's natural state at all? What if it is a thing being manufactured for you, this instant, freshly, by an entire room ceaselessly touching everything in it, and the calm, solid givenness you are resting in is actually the loudest, busiest, most relentless process in the universe, running full tilt so that you can lie still? They had it upside down, and once you turn it right way up, the mind is nowhere in it. There is no ingredient left for consciousness to be. The world was already doing all the collapsing in the dark before life began. Now I have to be scrupulously honest with you, because there is a subtlety here, and I promised you I would not flatter you or myself with a story that is cleaner than the truth. What I just described, the leaking of information into the environment, splitting the fog into separate non-touching stories, is real physics. It is experimentally confirmed, it is not controversial, and it completely dissolves the idea that a mind is needed to end the quantum weirdness. That much is settled. But it does one thing, and it does not, on its own, do a second thing. And the honest physicists will hold my feet to the fire if I blur them, so I will not. What it does, it explains, with no mind required, why you never see a needle blurred between two positions, why the world always presents itself to you as definite outcomes, and never as a visible fog, why the interference vanishes the instant the world gets in. It turns the runaway chain from an endless smear into a set of clean, separate, no longer touching stories. That is enormous, and it is the death of the consciousness argument, because it takes everything the mind was supposed to explain and hands it to a warm, crowded room. What it does not, by itself, fully settle is the very last and deepest step, and this is where we are heading in the final act. So let me only plant it here. It gives you many separate stories. Needle left in one, needle right in another, no longer able to touch. But you only ever live one of them. You open your eyes and there is one needle, pointing one way, for you. So the last question, the one that does not dissolve, is this. Given that the physics smoothly produces all the separate stories, why do you find yourself in this one, and what happened to the others? That is the real, surviving mystery, and it is much stranger than your mind makes reality, and we will stand at its edge before the night is done. But hold, for now, on the thing we have firmly won. No consciousness is required to get from the fog to definite facts. The world does that itself. So how do physicists actually think about what is going on once you take the mind out? Because here is something the pop version never tells you. There is not one official answer. There are several. They are called interpretations. They are all consistent with every experiment ever done. Brilliant people disagree about which is right. And I want you to hear the honest menu, because every single dish on it does the job without a shred of consciousness in it. One way to think about it, the old workhorse, simply says, the smooth wave is a tool for calculating the odds of what you will find. And when the world interacts with the system, you use those odds. One outcome happens, and you should not ask for a deeper story underneath, because there may not be one. Modest, a little unsatisfying, and notice, no mind, just interaction and probability. Another way, and this one is bracing, says nothing ever collapses at all. Every possibility that the smooth rule produces is fully real. When the detector, and then you get pulled into the fog does not shrink to one outcome. It keeps every outcome, and every outcome is a real story that goes on, including a version of you in each. You experience only one because there is now a you in each branch, and each one feels singular and complete, each certain it is the only one. Nothing collapses. Reality just keeps branching into ever more separate stories, and the sensation of a single, definite outcome is simply what it feels like to be one branch among countless. It is a staggering idea, and you do not have to like it but notice. It needs no consciousness to make anything real. It makes everything real and lets your mind be just one more thing that got split. Another way keeps the particle always definite, always in one real place with one real path, and adds an underlying wave that guides it. So the electron really did go through one slit, and the wave that went through both is what steered it. Perfectly definite, perfectly mind-free, and it reproduces every result. Another way says the collapse is a real physical event, an actual tiny random jump that happens on its own. Spontaneously, more and more often the bigger a thing gets, so a lone electron almost never collapses, but anything as large as a detector collapses billions of times a second, all by itself, no observer of any kind involved, just a new law of nature that makes big things snap into definiteness. Another way says the wave was never a thing in the world at all, but a description of what a given observer knows, so that collapse is just an update of information when you learn something. The way the odds on a coin change the instant you see it land. And notice here, even the word observer means only an information-having system, which a thermostat qualifies for. 6 ways of reading the same flawless mathematics. They disagree about profound things, about whether the world is one or many, deterministic or truly random, whether the wave is real or just bookkeeping. Physicists argue about them with real passion, and the argument is not settled and may never be. But run your eye down the whole menu and see the one thing they all share, the thing the pop version desperately does not want you to notice. Not one of them needs your mind. Not one of them makes consciousness the ingredient that turns maybe into is. In every serious reading of quantum physics that working scientists actually hold, the collapse, or the branching, or the guiding, or the updating is done by interaction, by the world, by information, by physical law, and never, ever by awareness. The mind is not in any of the real answers. It was only ever in the advertisement. So the beautiful lie is, at this point, thoroughly dead. Reality does not wait for you to look. It was collapsing itself into facts in the roaring dark for 9 billion years before there were eyes. And it does so by the mindless leaking of information into a crowded world, and every serious account physicists give of the process leaves consciousness out entirely. But do not mistake the death of the lie for the death of the strangeness. We have only cleared away the false mystery, and there are real ones underneath it, stranger than the fantasy we buried. And before the night is over, I am going to take you down to the deepest of them. First, though, let me answer a question you may have been holding since we started, because the answer shows you exactly how far down this goes. Let me put a question in your hands that the founders could only dream about, because for a long time nobody could test it, and now, at last, we can. Reach out, in your mind, and feel whatever is nearest to you, the blanket, the edge of the bed, your own hand, resting there in the dark, solid, single, in one definite place, obeying every boring rule you have trusted your whole life. Have you ever wondered why? Not why your hand is warm or alive, but why your hand, made of the very same particles that go foggy and take every path at once, never does that. Why you have never, not once, caught any large thing, ever, in 2 places at the same time. The easy answer, the one people reach for, is that there must be a wall, a line, somewhere, where the little quantum world ends and the big solid world begins. Small things, they say, are quantum and weird. Big things are classical and sensible. And somewhere in between is a border, and your hand lives comfortably on the sensible side. But nobody has ever found that wall, and people have been hunting for it hard by playing the most patient game in physics, taking the fog and trying to grow it, making bigger and bigger things behave like waves to see where, if anywhere, it finally breaks. It started with the smallest things, single particles of light and lone electrons. Then whole atoms, each one a bundle of dozens of smaller pieces, were sent through the two-slit gauntlet, and they too arrived as waves, interfering with themselves. Then molecules, first small ones. Then a molecule of 60 carbon atoms, a tiny geodesic sphere, a thing with real structure. A little soccer ball of matter was coaxed into going through both slits at once and interfering with itself on the far side. Then bigger molecules still, built of hundreds and then thousands of atoms, stitched together, complex, almost the size of small biological things, and every time, held in enough isolation, they go foggy, they spread, they take every path, they interfere, and it did not stop at molecules. Physicists have taken tiny manufactured objects, little drumheads and slivers and membranes, small but not unimaginably small, some of them just at the edge of what a careful eye could catch, and cooled them to a breath above the coldest temperature that can exist, and shielded them, and quieted them, and coaxed those little solid manufactured things into a blur of two states at once, vibrating and still at the same time, here and slightly there at once, objects you could almost see, held briefly in the fog. And here is the result of all that patient hunting, and it should reshape how you see the room around you. There is no wall. Nobody has found a size where the quantum weirdness suddenly switches off and the classical world takes over. Every single time a big thing refuses to go foggy, the reason turns out to be the same humble thing we already met. It could not be kept isolated. It was leaking its secret into the world too fast. And every time the physicists fought harder, colder, quieter, more shielded, they pushed the fog to a bigger thing. The border keeps retreating in front of them as their isolation improves, which points more and more strongly at a conclusion the founders would have found almost unbearable. There may be no border at all. The fog may go all the way up. Your hand, a mountain, a moon, may be, underneath, exactly as quantum as an electron, and definite only because they are large and warm and loud, and utterly unable to keep a secret from the world for even the shortest instant. Let that resettle the whole picture one more time. Your hand is not solid because it lives on the safe side of a wall. Your hand is solid because it cannot shut up. It is screaming its position into the light and the air and the warmth a trillion times a second, pinned into one place by the sheer impossibility of keeping all of that quiet. Solidity, the most ordinary thing you know, the thing you trust without a thought, turns out to be not the absence of quantum strangeness, but the drowning of it. The strangeness buried under an avalanche of the world, constantly taking note. You are not exempt from the fog. You are the fog, shouting so loudly it can never be a fog again. So here is the question at the frontier tonight, the one nobody can yet answer, and I love that I get to hand you an open one instead of a closed one. How big could it go? If you could build a perfect enough isolation, a cold enough, quiet enough, a more shielded pocket than any that exists, is there any size of thing that could not, in principle, be spread into the fog? A speck of dust, a grain of sand, something you could hold, something alive? Nobody knows. There may be a real limit out there, some point where a new law we have not found yet finally forbids it. And finding that limit would be one of the great discoveries. Or there may be no limit, and the only thing that ever stops anything from going foggy is the practical impossibility of hushing the world. Physicists are, right now, tonight, building the machines to push on exactly this. And you get to fall asleep not knowing the answer, which is the most honest place a mind can rest. At the live edge of a real question, with the fog reaching up toward the size of your own hand, and no wall in sight. And if there is no wall, if the fog really can climb toward the size of a living thing, then we are finally ready to deal with the most famous animal in the history of physics. You knew, before you ever found this channel, about a certain cat. Almost everyone does. A cat, sealed in a box, with a fiendish contraption inside, a bit of poison rigged to be released, or not depending on a single quantum event, a lone atom that may or may not have crumbled. And because that atom, left alone, is a fog of both at once, decayed and not decayed, the story goes that the cat, chained to the atom's fate, must also be both at once. Alive and dead, smeared together, a blur of a living cat and a dead one. And it stays that ghastly way until a person opens the box and looks, and only then does the looking decide whether the cat lives or dies. Have you ever been told that version and felt the little shiver of it, the idea that your look is what kills or saves the cat? Then let me give you back something that has been stolen from you, because it changes everything, and it is one of my favourite facts in all of physics. The man who invented that cat, Erwin Schrödinger, one of the founders, the very person who wrote down the smooth flowing wave equation at the heart of all this, did not invent the cat to tell you your mind decides the cat's fate. He invented it to mock exactly that idea. The cat was a joke, a savage, brilliant joke, aimed at people who wanted to take the fog literally all the way up to the scale of living things. He was saying, in effect, if you really believe a thing stays in a blur of possibilities until a conscious mind looks at it, then you are committed to this absurdity. A cat both alive and dead, and that is ridiculous, so something is badly wrong with how you are talking about measurement. He was on our side. He built the cat to make the consciousness reading look as silly as it deserves to look. And then history handed the cat to the very people he was laughing at, and they have been holding it up as proof of the opposite ever since. And now you know enough to finish his joke for him. Why is the cat never really in a blur? For the exact reason we have circled all night. A cat is enormous, warm, breathing, alive, made of trillions upon trillions of loud, restless particles. The instant that poison mechanism does anything at all, the news of it floods into the cat's own body, into the air of the box, into the warmth on the walls, recorded 1 trillion times over before a single second passes. The cat's fate is settled, in the dark, inside the sealed box, by the cat and the box and the air, long, long before any hand touches the lid. The cat, if we are being honest, is its own observer. Its own trillion particles witness its fate instantly. There was never a smeared cat waiting for you. There was a living cat, or a dead one, decided in private, and your opening of the lid only tells you which. Exactly the way lifting a cup only tells you how a coin already landed. Schrödinger knew this in his bones. The cat was never the mystery. The cat was the punchline. But here is where it turns from a 100-year-old joke into something alive and astonishing, something the founders never got to see. We could not build Schrödinger's box for a cat because you cannot isolate a cat. But we have learned, in the last few decades, to build that box for small things. We have learned to take tiny bits of matter and wrap them in such fierce, cold, shielded isolation that we can hold them in the fog on purpose, keep them in a blur of both values at once, and put that blur to work. That is what a quantum computer is. It is a machine whose entire job is to keep small things in the very state Schrödinger's cat was mocked for, a real, controlled, useful fog, and to let those fogs cross and interfere to compute things an ordinary computer never could. And now watch what those machines prove. Every single day, in laboratories staffed by teams of wide-awake, conscious people. The great enemy of a quantum computer, the thing its builders fight with everything they have, the thing that ruins the computation and forces the fog to collapse into ordinary, boring facts, is precisely observation in the only sense the word ever meant. Any stray interaction, any leak of information into the surrounding world. A whisper of heat, a stray particle of light, the faintest vibration of the floor, and the fog is gone, the machine's magic destroyed, its possibilities pinned into dull certainty. Engineers spend fortunes, cool these machines colder than deep space, hang them in shielded silence, wage total war on the environment, all to keep the world from observing the fog and wrecking it. And here is the hammer, the final blow, and I want you to feel how complete it is. The thing they fight to keep out is not consciousness. Not once, in the entire multi-billion-dollar effort to build these machines, has anyone worried that a scientist glancing at the apparatus will collapse the computation. Nobody shields a quantum computer from human awareness. They shield it from stray photons and heat and vibration, from the mindless touching of the physical world. The rooms are full of people, watching, thinking, aware, all day long. And the machines run fine, because a mind looking was never, ever the threat. The threat was always the environment, exactly as we said from the beginning. If the mystical story were true, if consciousness collapsed the fog, then a quantum computer could never run in a staffed laboratory. Because the fog would die the instant a technician wondered how it was doing. They run beautifully, watched by crowds of conscious minds, precisely because the observer that kills the fog is the world, not the witness. So we took the strangest, most misunderstood thing in all of physics, the fog, the possibility blur, the thing the gurus built a religion on, and we turned it into a tool, and the whole engineering of that tool, every cold, shielded inch of it, is a daily, industrial, humming proof of everything we have said tonight. The fog is real. The fog is fragile. And the thing that ends it is the mindless, ceaseless observation of a physical world that cannot stop touching itself, and never, in any laboratory on Earth, the quiet attention of a human mind. Schrödinger would have loved it. He built a cat to laugh at the idea that minds make reality. And a century later, we built machines that prove his point in silicon and liquid helium, watched over by rooms full of the very minds that were never the danger, which makes it all the more worth turning now, to face honestly what a whole industry has tried to sell you in that same fog's name. I want to spend a little while on what people built on top of this mistake, because it is not harmless, and because you have almost certainly been sold some of it. And I think you deserve to see the machinery. Once the reluctant, technical, deeply qualified idea escaped the physicists, it became a product, and the product needed a story, and the story was the beautiful lie, stripped of every caveat, that made it honest. Somewhere around the turn of the century, a film went out into the world that took the observer effect and the double slit and wrapped them around a message about how your consciousness shapes reality, mixing real scientists on camera with claims the real scientists would never have made, some of them later saying they had been edited to sound as though they endorsed things they found absurd. And it worked. It made a fortune. It launched 1,000 imitators. And it seeded a phrase into the culture that is still everywhere tonight. Quantum physics proves that you create your own reality. From there, it grew into an entire economy. There is a whole industry now that sells you the idea that your thoughts, tuned correctly, reach out and rearrange the world. You have heard its vocabulary because it stole its vocabulary from the very physics we have been walking through. It tells you to raise your vibration, to match the frequency of what you want, to collapse the wave function of your desires into reality, to quantum jump into a better life, to manifest by observing the outcome you choose. Every one of those phrases is a real physics word doing a fake physics job. Frequency is real. It describes how fast a wave wiggles. It has nothing to do with your mood. Vibration is real. It describes matter oscillating. It is not a spiritual channel you tune. Collapse is real. We spent all night on it, and it is done by a stray photon in the dark, not by wanting. These are not metaphors that got a little loose. They are the exact stage props of the science, lifted off the set and used to sell a spell. And I want to be precise about the trick, because the trick is always the same. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it, and you will spot it in 100 other places. The trick is to take a mysterious, strange, unresolved thing at the edge of physics, the measurement problem, the observer effect, and treat the mystery itself as a blank check. The reasoning underneath is, physics admits it does not fully understand measurement, and consciousness is mysterious too. So maybe they are the same mystery. So maybe my mind does reach into the world. But two things being mysterious does not make them the same thing. The measurement problem is a specific, well-defined hole in a specific, well-tested theory. Your inner life is a different mystery entirely. Laying them next to each other and letting the fog of one seep into the other is not an argument. It is a mood dressed as an argument. And it sells beautifully because it flatters and because almost no one has ever been walked through what the word observer actually means, which is the one thing that pops the whole balloon. Now I have to be fair, scrupulously fair, because there is a grain of truth buried in all of this, and the sellers are counting on you never separating the grain from the con. So let me separate it for you, cleanly, because the true part is worth having. Does your mind affect your body? Yes. Absolutely, powerfully, measurably, yes. This is not woo, it is medicine. Your beliefs and your expectations change your physical body all the time. The placebo effect is real and strong. Believe a treatment will help, and your brain releases its own chemistry that can dull real pain, calm a real racing heart, shift real markers in your blood. Chronic dread bathes your body in stress hormones that wear down your real tissues. What you expect, what you attend to, what you tell yourself, reaches down through your nervous system and your hormones and your immune response and edits your physical state, night and day. That is completely real, and it is one of the most underused powers a person has, and I would never take it from you. But look exactly at how it works, because the how is everything. Your mind affects your body through a physical bridge. Your brain is wired by nerves and chemistry into every organ you have. When your expectation changes your pain, it is because your brain, a physical thing, sent physical signals down physical nerves and released physical molecules into a physical body it is directly connected to. Your mind influences the one lump of matter it is plugged into, its own body, through ordinary, traceable physical wiring. That is real, and it is not magic, and it is not quantum, and it does not need to be. And here is the line, the whole line, the line the industry exists to blur. Your mind influencing the body it is physically wired into is a real, mundane, powerful thing. Your mind reaching out across the room, across the city, across space, to collapse a distant wave, rearrange external matter, summon a parking space, or bend the odds of the world in your favor by wanting, is not a thing at all. There is no wiring for it. There is no mechanism. There is no experiment that has ever shown it, and the entire physics of the observer effect, correctly understood, says there is no room for it. The confusion the sellers depend on is between mind over its own body, which is true and useful, and mind over the external world, which is false and for sale. And here is the part that should make you a little angry on your own behalf. Once you see it, the truth was enough. The real version is better than the con. You do not need to be a wave-collapsing god for your attention to shape your life, because your attention already shapes your life, hugely, through completely honest channels. Where you point your focus is where your effort goes. What you believe about your own capability changes what you attempt, and what you attempt changes what happens to you. Your expectations move your body moves through the world, and the world responds to what your body actually does. That is a real, potent, usable kind of power over your own life, and it runs entirely on ordinary cause and effect. The manifestation industry took that true, usable thing and traded it for a false, unusable thing, and called the trade an upgrade. It is a downgrade. It swapped a power you can actually pick up and use for a fantasy you can only believe in while you wait for a world that is not listening. They sold you a spell to replace a tool you already owned. So when the video tells you the double slit proves you manifest reality, you now know exactly what to do with it. You know the experiment is real and the interpretation is a costume. You know observer never meant mind. You know the grain of truth. Your beliefs move your own body through real wiring. And you know the lie it was wrapped in, your mind reaching out to rearrange the world. And you can keep the grain and drop the costume and be both more honest and, strangely, more powerful for it. Because now the power you are holding is one that actually works. That is the industry. That is what got built on the mistake and what it costs the people who buy it and the true thing it was hiding all along. Now let me take you back into the physics itself, because we left the deepest part unfinished. I told you there were several honest ways to read all this, and I gave you the quick menu. But two of those doors are worth opening all the way, because behind them the real strangeness lives, and neither of them, I promise you, has a mind anywhere inside it. Remember where we are. The mind is out of the story. The world collapses its own fog by leaking information into a crowded universe, mindlessly, in the dark. But we still have that last, honest, unhealed question underneath it all. What is actually going on down there? What is the wave, really? And the disturbing, wonderful truth is that physics does not agree with itself about the answer, and the disagreement is not a small technical squabble, it is a chasm. Let me take you to the edges of two of the deepest ways of reading it, because standing between them is the most honest place you can stand tonight, and because it will show you how far the real mystery runs once the false one is cleared away. Open the first door. Behind this one, the wave was never a thing in the world at all. It was never a physical fog out there in space, spreading and collapsing. It was always only information, a description of what could be known about the system, held by whoever is doing the knowing. And on this reading, the famous collapse, the terror of the founders, The jump from many possibilities to one is not a physical event at all. It is simply what happens to your knowledge when you learn something. It is an update, nothing more. Think of the least mysterious version of this, so you feel the shape of it. A coin is spinning under a cup. You would honestly say it is 50-50, heads or tails, and that 50-50 is real. It describes your actual state of knowledge. Then you lift the cup and see heads, and in that instant, the 50-50 collapses to certainty. But nothing physical happened to the coin when your knowledge jumped. The coin was already whatever it was. What changed was you, your information updated. On this reading of quantum physics, the wave collapsing is exactly that. And the reason it looks instantaneous and spooky is that we mistook a change in information for a change in the world. And here is the vertigo behind this door, the thing that will keep you awake if you let it. If the wave is knowledge, then it is always someone's knowledge. Some particular system's information about the rest. And different systems, standing in different places, can hold different, equally valid information about the same events. Which means there may be no single, master, God's eye description of the world at all. No view from nowhere. No one true wave for the whole universe that everyone would agree on. Just a web of points of view, each with its own honest account, none of them the final word. This is exactly what those recent Wigner's friend experiments were whispering. The friend inside the sealed room has one honest set of facts. The experimenter outside has another, and there may be no higher court that overrules either. Reality, on this reading, is irreducibly relational, always relative to a standpoint, and the dream of one complete objective story of everything is just that, a dream. And notice, carefully, that the observer in all of this is not a mind. It is any physical system that carries information about another. A thermostat holds information about a room. One atom holds information about the atom it just bounced off. The word means an information-bearing physical thing, and a mind is only one very fancy example, not the point. Sit with the vertigo of it for a moment, honestly. Have you ever simply assumed, as everyone does, that there is one true story of your day, one real account of what actually happened, that you would recognize if only you could see it all, even from above? This door says there may be no such view from above. Only accounts, only standpoints, only the world as it looks, from where each thing sits inside it, all the way down, with no final page that settles it. Now close that door and open the other one, because it goes the opposite way. And the fact that both of these can fit every experiment ever run is itself the deepest thing I can show you. Behind the second door, nothing is ever uncertain. Nothing is ever a fog. There is no genuine randomness anywhere, no jump, no collapse, no dice. Every particle in the universe has, at every instant, a perfectly definite position and a perfectly definite path. Exactly the way your oldest intuition always wanted, and it always did go through one slit, and only one. The world is as solid and definite and clockwork as Newton ever dreamed, all the way down, with no observer needed and no possibility fog to be found. But then, what was the wave? On this reading, the wave is also real, a second, genuine thing that exists alongside the definite particles. A vast, guiding field that spreads out through space, passes through both slits, even though the particle went through only one, and steers the particle's motion like a current steering a cork. The particle rides the wave. The wave goes through both openings and comes out the other side rippled with interference. And it nudges the single definite particle along paths that build up, over many runs, into the striped pattern. So you get the interference, you get every correct prediction, And yet every particle was always exactly somewhere, doing exactly one definite thing the whole time. The fog was never real. The definiteness was never lost. There was nothing for a mind to collapse, because nothing was ever uncollapsed. It sounds like it gives you your comfortable solid world back, and in one way it does, but it charges a price that is stranger than the thing it removed, and I have to be honest about the price. For this to work, for the guiding wave to steer the particles correctly, the wave has to link everything to everything, instantly, across any distance. Nudge one particle here, and its guiding wave adjusts what a partnered particle does far away, with no delay for the light to cross the gap. This reading buys you a perfectly definite, clockwork world at the cost of a universe stitched together by instant, invisible connections that reach across all of space at once. You wanted your solid reality back, and you can have it, but only if you accept that underneath the solidity, everything is threaded to everything else in a single, seamless whole that does not care about distance. The clockwork returns, but the clock is one indivisible piece as wide as the cosmos. So look at what you are standing between. One door says the wave is not even real, it is only information, and there may be no single objective world at all, just a web of viewpoints. The other door says the wave is real, and so are perfectly definite particles, and the world is exact clockwork, but woven together instantly across all of space into one thing. One says reality is less solid than you thought, maybe not even single. The other says it is more solid than you thought, fully definite, but impossibly seamlessly connected. They could hardly disagree more. One erases the objective world, the other restores it and then stitches it into a single, indivisible whole. And here is the honest, humbling, beautiful fact that I most want you to carry out of tonight. Every experiment ever performed, every single one, in 100 years of the most precise testing human beings have ever done, is perfectly consistent with both. We cannot yet tell which door, if either, is the real one. The mathematics we can check comes out the same through all of them. That is the true size of the mystery, once you clear the flattering fantasy out of the way. It was never, does your mind make the world? It is this, the world is so strange at the bottom that our best minds cannot yet decide whether it is barely real or seamlessly whole, whether there is one reality or a web of them, and the evidence sits there, gorgeous and mute, refusing to break the tie. And through every one of those doors, without exception, your consciousness is a bystander. The strangeness is real, the mystery is enormous, and none of it, anywhere, in any honest reading, is waiting on you to look. We have taken the beautiful lie apart, piece by piece, and it did not survive. To observe is to interact. To interact is to touch. Touching floods the news into a crowded world, and a crowded world pins possibility into fact, in the dark, with no mind anywhere near, and has been doing so since long before the first eye. Every serious reading of the physics leaves consciousness out. The moon is there when nobody looks. You are not a reality-warping wizard, and reality does not lean on your gaze. Most people would stop there and dust off their hands and file quantum physics under misunderstood, now cleared up, nothing to see. And that would be a mistake, because it would trade one flattering story for another, the story that says the mystery is gone and the world is simple after all. It is not gone. We only cleared away the false mystery to uncover the real one, and the real one is standing right where we left it, in the last room, breathing. Here it is. Go back to the moment the fog splits into separate stories. The detector touches the electron, the news floods out into the world, and the single blurred wave becomes two clean stories that can no longer touch. Needle left, and a whole world built on it, and needle right, and a whole world built on it. The physics, the smooth, honest rule, produces both. It does not, on its own, erase either one. Both stories are there, in the mathematics, fully formed, side by side, and yet you only ever live one. You walk over to the detector, and you look, and there is one needle, pointing one way. Just one. You do not experience a blur of two possible selves. You do not feel yourself split. You get one outcome, one world, one fact, sharp and singular and yours. So where did the other story go? The physics made it. The physics did not destroy it. But it is not in your life. You are in exactly one of the branches the equations produced. And from the inside, it feels like the only one that was ever real. And the question that no leaking into the environment, no crowded room, no interpretation has ever fully closed, is the plainest question a child could ask. Why this one? Why did you get needle left and not needle right? What picked the branch you are living from all the ones the physics made? And if the answer is truly nothing, if it is pure, causeless, bottomless chance, the only such thing in all of nature, then what does it even mean for the others, the unlived branches, the roads not taken that the equations insist were just as real as the one you are on? That is the measurement problem, still open, 100 years on. We did not solve it tonight. We only took away the wrong solution. The founders reached for consciousness to close this gap, and we have seen they did not need to, because the crowded world does the collapsing. But look closely, and you see that the crowded world explains why you never see a blur, and it does not, by itself, explain why there is one you at all. Having one experience, in one branch, rather than the whole spread of them. Something about the passage from the many stories the physics writes to the single story you actually live remains truly unaccounted for. It is smaller than the false mystery and deeper, and it does not flatter you even slightly, and it is real. And here is the part that should make the hair stand up on your arms, because it is not old philosophy, it is a laboratory, and it is recent. For a long time, Wigner's sealed friend was a thought experiment, a story you argued about over coffee. You could not actually build it. You cannot really seal a conscious human in a box and put them in a blur of two possibilities and check. But in the last few years, physicists have built the next best thing. They have made tiny, simple observers, small quantum systems that make a measurement and record a result. The humblest possible stand-in for a witness, and they have run versions of Wigner's scenario for real, with actual particles, actual measurements, actual data, and the results are staggering. In these experiments, you can set things up so that a little observer inside the sealed system records a definite outcome, a real, single, settled fact from its point of view, and at the same time, an outside experimenter, treating that whole sealed system by the smooth rule, gets to make a measurement of their own, whose result is only consistent if no single definite fact was settled inside. Two observers. One of them has a definite outcome. The other, looking at the same events from outside, finds that there was no single outcome to have, and the mathematics, confirmed in the lab, says both are entitled to their view, and there is no experiment that makes one of them simply wrong. Sit with what that is actually saying, because it is not what the mystics wanted, and it is stranger than what they wanted. It is not saying your mind made the result. The little observer's mind, if we even grant it the word, did nothing to the world. It just registered, mechanically, like the detector always did. What the experiment is saying is something far more vertiginous, that the very idea of a single, universal, observer-independent fact, one true story of what happened that everyone would agree on if only they could see it all, may not survive contact with quantum physics. That whether a thing definitely happened might depend on where you stand relative to it, not on whether you are conscious, on whether you are inside the sealed room or outside it. Facts, at the bottom of the world, may be local to a point of view, not because minds make them, but because the physics does not guarantee that all the separate stories can ever be stitched into one. That is the real successor to the observer effect. And notice how it turns the flattering version inside out one final time. The pop version said, "Your consciousness is so powerful, it creates a single reality." The laboratory says, reality may not come in a single edition at all, and your consciousness has nothing to do with it. And the loss of a single, universal set of facts is forced on us, not by mind, but by the mindless mathematics of measurement itself. You wanted to be the author of one world. What the physics offers instead is far less flattering and far more strange. A cosmos where what really happened might not have one answer. And you, a small, definite creature reading one definite page of it, unable to see the others, not because you are magic, but because a point of view is all any observer, conscious or not, mechanical or human, ever gets. Now I have to hold a hard line here, the hardest of the night, because this is exactly the place where the beautiful lie tries to crawl back in through a side door. And if I let it, I would be doing the very thing I spent 4 acts warning you about. You might be thinking, but wait, you keep saying point of view, you keep saying observer, you keep saying the story you live, and doesn't all of that sound like it? Is sneaking consciousness back in as important after all? So, let me be careful. It is not, and here is the clean divide, and I want you to carry it out of tonight because it will protect you from 100 bad videos. There are 2 completely different questions that the mystical version deliberately smears together. The first is, does consciousness reach out and change the physical outcome of a quantum measurement? Collapse the wave, pick the needle, make the fact? And the answer to that, the whole thrust of everything we have done tonight, is a clear and confident no. The detector does it, the environment does it, the physics does it, in the dark, mindlessly, and the mind is a spectator that arrives long after the outcome is already fixed by the world. The second question is entirely separate. Why is there something it is like to be you, reading one of these outcomes from the inside at all? Why is there an experience, a felt point of view, a someone home behind your eyes, having the one branch happen to them? That is a real and deep and unsolved question, the deepest one we have, but it is a question about the nature of experience, and it is not the same question as whether experience pushes electrons around. The first question is about physics, and physics has answered it, no. The second is about consciousness itself, and it is open. And the honest thing, the thing that keeps you safe from the sellers, is to refuse to let the openness of the second question be smuggled in as evidence for a yes to the first. That your inner life is mysterious does not mean your inner life collapses wave functions, 2 different mysteries. The con is to blur them, the truth is to keep them apart. So here is the honest final accounting, and then I will bring you home. Does consciousness create reality? No. That question is settled as firmly as anything in this strange science gets settled. The observer effect is real, but the observer was never a mind. It was any scrap of matter that interacts and tells the world, which is everything, everywhere, always. But underneath that settled no, two real mysteries go on breathing in the dark, and they are stranger and more honest than the fantasy we buried. 1. Why do you live this single branch and not another? And what is the standing of all the others the physics wrote? 2. Why is there anyone in here to live any branch at all? Neither of those needs you to be a god. Both of them are more interesting than being a god. And that, I think, is the trade the whole night has been offering you. So let me bring you home, the way I always try to, back from the slits and the sealed rooms and the 100-year argument, back to you, wherever you actually are right now, lying in the dark with a small light on, a real animal on a real world, being pelted by photons that are pinning you into being exactly, definitely here. You came into tonight, maybe, half hoping the beautiful story was true, half hoping I would tell you that your attention is a kind of power, that the universe is soft and waiting and yours to shape, that you matter to the cosmos in the biggest way a thing can matter, by being the one who makes it real, and I took that from you. I want to be honest that I took it, because I do not think you should let anyone take something from you and call it a gift without showing you what they are putting in its place. So here is what I am putting in its place, and I think it is worth more, and I will try to earn that before you sleep. You are not the author of reality, but look at what you actually are. You are a piece of that mindless, roaring, self-collapsing world, the same world that has been turning fog into fact in the dark for 13.5 billion years with nobody watching, and somehow, on one damp rock, after 9 billion years of that, a corner of it folded up and grew complicated enough to turn around and look back at the rest. You are the part of the mindless universe that started asking what it is. Not the thing that makes the world real, something rarer than that, and stranger, and by any honest measure more astonishing, the thing the real world eventually built that can understand it. Think about the actual order of events, because it is the whole comfort, if you will let it be. The universe did not wait for you. That is the deflating part, and we will not pretend it away. But turn it over. The universe did not need you in order to be, which means the universe you belong to is not a fragile thing, leaning on your gaze, flickering out whenever you look away. It is solid. It is real all the way down and all the way back, real for billions of years before there was a single eye, real out to the farthest galaxy that no telescope will ever reach, real in the dark, real without you. You did not make it. You arrived in it. You are the witness who came in at the end of a story, already written, unimaginably vast and old, and finished long before your first breath. And your gift is not that you author the pages. Your gift is that, alone among almost everything that has ever existed, you get to read them. And do you understand what a thing that is? For 13.5 billion years the collapsing went on. The stars formed and died. The atoms that would one day be you were forged in the hearts of suns that burned out before the earth existed. And none of it, not one moment of it, was seen. It just happened. Fact after fact after fact, in the enormous silence, for no one. And then, at the very end of that, a set of those forged atoms arranged themselves into you, into a thing that could open its eyes and take some of it in and be amazed. You are not the reason the stars are real. You are something better positioned to be grateful. The improbable place where a mindless cosmos finally gets looked at and known and wondered about by a piece of itself. Not the author, the reader. The first and only kind of thing in this whole story that the story can happen to, the mystics offered you a small, flattering job. Hold reality together with your attention. What is actually true offers you a larger and quieter one. You are the rare corner of a mindless reality that came to know it is here at all, without that knowing being needed to keep a single light on. You can put the job down. That is the part I most want you to take into sleep. If your looking made the world, you could never rest. You would have to watch all night, or risk it dissolving. But your looking never made the world, and so you are free. You can close your eyes, you can stop watching, you can let the whole enormous, definite, self-sustaining thing go on being real without you for 8 hours. Because it was always doing exactly that anyway. In every unseen canyon, and on the dark side of every world, and in the deep of every ocean, where your gaze has never once reached. The moon does not need you to look at it. And tonight, for once, let that be a relief instead of a wound. It means you are allowed to close your eyes. It means the world can be trusted to keep itself. It means you are never holding it up, and you can finally, safely, set down a weight you were told to carry and never actually had to. Before you drift, one question to carry down with you, not to answer for me, just to hold. Of all the things you are sure are real, the room around you, the people you love asleep in other rooms, the ground under the building, which ones did you ever actually make real by looking? And which ones, if you are honest, were simply, generously, there the whole time, waiting for you to arrive and notice, asking nothing of you but that you wake up inside them for a little while. I think you know. I think you have always known. The world was never yours to create. It was only ever yours to witness, and that turns out to be the more beautiful of the two. So, close your eyes now. You do not have to keep anything real tonight. Let the world do what it has always done. In the dark, without a single witness. Faithfully. For billions of years. It will still be here when you wake. It always was. Now this,